Matt Hill was returning home with his fox friends, and barged into my bedroom, saw the love letters under my pillow. Matt Hill's face immediately looked worse than eating a fly. When I went downstairs to eat, he kicked my chair over. The sound of clang startled Mr. Hill. Dad, Iris Harriman is not disabled. Wouldn't it be the same for her to get out and live in school? Why do you have to stay in our house? Matt Hill's brow furrowed, his handsome face full of impatience. As if I hadn't heard these ugly words, I silently propped up my chair and listened to the whispered ridicule of my classmates around me. After the love letter was turned out just now, someone read it aloud with affection. Sensual and pretentious sentences give people goosebumps. Matt Hill, the first time I saw you, I silently liked you. Your eyes are as beautiful as a galaxy. Ha 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 ha. A few people over there were laughing and their stomachs cramped. Matt Hill snatched it and tore it up and threw it in my face, saying to me viciously, "Disgusting." When school started, I was stuffed into Matt Hill's house by my dad. It happens to be the same school as Matt Hill, so it's convenient to do anything. Matt Hill has been an only child for so many years, and suddenly there is another child in the family, and he has also separated his parents' love. I'm a girl again, and there are a lot of people who speculate about our relationship. Matt Hill hated me even more. Every day when I open my eyes, I just find a way to trouble me and embarrass me. But Mr. Hill was very protective of me. The nanny cooks the dishes, and he puts them on the table like a good father. Iris Harriman is also your sister. It is just right to live in our house. Don't say such unpleasant things in the future. Mr. Hill feigned anger and glared at Matt Hill. When he served the soup, it seemed to have accidentally spilled on my skirt. The location is somewhat awkward. When I took the tissue to wipe it, he snatched it with a grin. Mr. Hill looked apologetic. I'm so sorry. My uncle was so focused on teaching that stinky boy a lesson that he forgot to hold the food in his hand. He lifted my skirt very naturally and wiped the vegetable soup on my legs, rubbing his hands higher and higher. Matt Hill's friends hate me, and there's no one around me, but I felt a gaze inexplicably. As soon as I looked up, I saw Jacob Woolley sitting across from me staring at me. He was tall, and when he looked down, he could see this nondescript scene under the table. But with just one glance, he withdrew his gaze, as if he hadn't seen anything. Mr. Hill put down the skirt for me, and then still looked like a good uncle. No burns, right? I bowed my head, was silent for a moment, and replied in a low voice, "Nope. My dad and Matt Hill's parents know each other. When I was a kid, I only met Matt Hill a few times. I came to study in a city far away from home. I didn't like living on campus, and my parents didn't want me to live alone, so they let me come to Matt Hill's house to borrow one. Matt Hill's house is huge, and when I came over, I was accommodated in a guest room, but within a few days, my door lock was inexplicably broken. I wanted to change rooms, but Mr. Hill kept putting it off. Obviously, there are so many empty rooms in the house. I would put a doll at the door every night before I went to bed, but every morning when I opened my eyes, the doll would change position. Someone came in last night. My room always shows signs of being touched. Mr. Hill is so good to me that he has no sense of boundaries. He would come into my room and help me collect my underwear. He would say that he was worried that I would be deceived by bad boys, and tell me some physiological knowledge that I already knew at my age. Occasionally, he would suddenly take me in his arms and say with a regretful face, "It's good to have a daughter. If only I had a daughter." It looks normal, but it gives me a very strange feeling. I told my dad that I wanted to move out and live on campus. In desperation, I told him everything I didn't feel good about. My dad didn't care. People who have wives and sons, what can they think of you as a little girl who hasn't grown up? You just have too many hearts. Don't make excuses and say that you want to live in school. I think you just study badly. No one around you is looking at you. Who knows what you will do? I said I'll go out and live alone. As a result, my dad froze my bank card and gave my living expenses to Mr. Hill, asking me to spend every penny. I was scared every day, especially when I was alone with Mr. Hill. But just yesterday, Mrs. Hill suddenly said that she was going back to her parents' house and would stay for a while. Matt Hill spends most of his evenings hanging out and fooling around with his friends. The nanny will also leave work at 9 o'clock and leave the villa on time. When the time comes, Mr. Hill and I will be the only ones left in the family. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. I didn't have a penny on me, so I had to sleep on the streets. So, I copied a love letter online. Except for the protagonist's name has changed. Nothing else has changed. I pressed the love letter under the pillow and deliberately exposed a corner. Sure enough, it was seen by Matt Hill's friends. Mrs. Hill had already packed her luggage and went downstairs. And when she left, she told us that there were snacks in the refrigerator, and that we would remember to eat them later. As soon as Mrs. Hill left, Mr. Hill next to me began to stare at me. As soon as the meal was over, Mr. Hill asked Matt Hill, "Will you be staying at home for the night?" Matt Hill pinched the console, went upstairs with a few friends, and said without looking back, "We booked in a sports hotel for the night, and I was staying outside, and I didn't want to see Iris Harriman's face." Matt Hill's figure vanished at the top of the stairs. Mr. Hill patted my leg with a look of helplessness. Uncle and Iris Harriman were left that night. What should I do? When I went upstairs, I was distracted all the time. The warm touch of Mr. Hill's hands seemed to linger on my legs. I was so frightened that I was a little trembling, and I was distracted as I stood in front of my bedroom door. The door slammed open, and a hand reached out, dragging me inside. Matt Hill and his friends were in the room. Matt Hill was playing games in the corner, and didn't even look at me. Someone started to heckle. Matt Hill, take a closer look. Iris Harriman is also good looking. You have been refusing to agree to the confession of the schoolgirl. Do you like Iris Harriman? This made Matt Hill's hand stop playing the game. He seemed to hear something unpleasant, cursed, and the game console was thrown aside. Matt Hill dragged me and threw me into Jacob Woolley's arms. Jacob Woolley's body stiffened for a moment when he touched me. Iris Harriman, if you can seduce Jacob Woolley, I'll let you go, or I'll make you cry until you can't speak. I couldn't help but shudder at the touch of Matt Hill's horrified eyes. A few people around laughed. Matt Hill, you might as well just clean her up. Jacob Woolley has never accepted anyone's confession. How can he agree to Iris Harriman? Jacob Woolley has a cold personality, and usually keeps his distance from the opposite sex. What's more, it's this kind of situation that clearly humiliates me and pushes it to him. It's almost certain that I'm going to have to suffer today. Matt Hill also had the look on my face that I was in danger of dying today. I looked back at Jacob Woolley, who was being held down by me. Jacob Woolley was staring at me, too. The narrow and cold eyes were calm and indifferent, as if they couldn't feel anything. Emboldened, I turned around and hugged him, leaned over and kissed him on the lips. Jacob Woolley's eyes widened a little stunned, but it still didn't push me away. The people around me seemed to be watching the excitement. Only Matt Hill couldn't laugh at all. When he saw that I actually kissed Jacob Woolley, his lips were almost pursed into a line, and his expression was faintly gritted teeth. By the time I let go of Jacob Woolley, I was out of breath. Jacob Woolley's expression didn't change. It just seemed that something had happened that he didn't care about. I tentatively asked, "Can I go to your house for the night?" Matt Hill behind him was in a hurry. Iris Harriman. His voice was a little higher. Jacob Woolley lifted his lips and said, "Yes." I looked back at Matt Hill, whose hands were clenched into fists and trembling. "I've seduced you. Can you stop hitting me?" Matt Hill kicked the bedside table hard as he left. "It's disgusting. Cheap stuff." As soon as he left, a few of his doglegs also left. Jacob Woolley stood up slowly. "Matt Hill is going out in a moment, so you won't have to be bullied. I'll go home first." Seeing that he was leaving, I hurriedly hugged him. "You promised me to take me to your house tonight." Jacob Woolley frowned slightly, as if he was in distress. "You like Matt Hill? I'll take you back to my house." "I'm afraid it's a little inappropriate," I hurriedly retorted. "I don't like Matt Hill." Afraid that he wouldn't believe me, I immediately continued the kiss just now. Jacob Woolley didn't hate me kissing him, and I became more and more presumptuous, and tried to prove that I didn't like Matt Hill. "I don't want to stay here tonight, nor can it stay here." Jacob Woolley eventually took me away. Jacob Woolley has always been cold, as if he was just trying to fulfill his casual promise. Jacob Woolley's home is huge, so big that it's a little empty. "I'll only take you in for one night." A few cold words, as if they couldn't wait to drive me away. I hurried to think about my strengths. "I know how to cook." Jacob Woolley didn't seem to hear it. "Don't come back after you go to school tomorrow morning," I continued. "I also do the laundry and housework." Jacob Woolley was fiddling with what he was doing, and he wasn't interested in me. I grabbed his hand and landed it on my chest. I can warm your bed too. My phone on silent was about to blow up. There's Mr. Hill's phone. There's my dad's phone. There's Matt Hill's phone. It was late and I never got home. Mr. Hill couldn't get in touch with me, so he called my dad, finally going around and asking Matt Hill if I was with him. When Matt Hill found out I wasn't home, he rushed home. My room was empty. Matt Hill calls Jacob Woolley. Jacob Woolley let out a lukewarm hum when he got through. Matt Hill asked, "Is Iris Harriman with you?" I was sitting on Jacob Woolley's lap when I asked this. I lay in Jacob Woolley's arms and kissed his Adam's apple. Jacob Woolley's voice was much heavier, with a bit of restraint. "Nope." Matt Hill was still asking, "You're the last to go. Did she say where she's going?" Jacob Woolley's breath trembled. It took a long time for Jacob Woolley to grit his teeth and spit out a few words. "I don't know about her." Matt Hill on the other side seemed to finally sense that something was wrong with Jacob Woolley. "Jacob Woolley, what are you doing?" Jacob Woolley's complexion is cold and white, and only the tails of his eyes are red at the moment. I looked up at him, and my mouth moved silently. "I'm doing something fun." Jacob Woolley covered my mouth, adjusted his breathing, and said to the other end of the line, "Nothing." Matt Hill doesn't hesitate. "You don't have anything to do at night. Come out and help me find someone together." Jacob Woolley seemed to be a little annoyed. "You hate her. What are you looking for her for?" As soon as he said this, it was Matt Hill's turn to be silent. Matt Hill tugged at the corners of his mouth, and his words were a little far-fetched. "Anyway, it's borrowed from my house, and if you die suddenly, won't I be responsible?" Jacob Woolley didn't want to say anything more. "I'm a little busy tonight." After saying that, he hung up the phone. Seeing that he threw his phone aside, I immediately straightened up the zipper for him and turned around to leave. I had just taken a step when suddenly someone grabbed me by the wrist. Jacob Woolley pulled me back into his arms and hugged my waist. That's when I realized that Jacob Woolley was just looking thin. When he held me, I couldn't move at all. Jacob Woolley changed his cold look and suddenly pressed me down with his hand. "I'm wearing a very short skirt, and there's no way around it." I was shivering. "I have finished speaking as you wish. Now, according to my wishes, you can also take care of the aftermath." My eyes were full of shock. I thought that Jacob Woolley was not interested in me, and that it was only out of kindness that he brought me home, so I felt free to tease him. But I didn't expect to get out of the wolf's den and enter the tiger's mouth again. The doorbell rang suddenly. Jacob Woolley ignored it and let the people outside the door press it. But after a while, the mobile phone in his hand rang again, and the words, "Matt Hill," on it seemed a bit of an eyesore at this time. Jacob Woolley didn't want to pick up, but when I was moving, I accidentally touched the answer by mistake. Matt Hill's eerie voice rang out on the phone. "Jacob Woolley, Iris Harriman is there for you." "Right. Are you going to open the door now? Or am I just going to kick this broken door to pieces?" Jacob Woolley smiled, his eyes a little dark. "You try." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was kicked violently. The people outside the door didn't know what method was used, and the door lock was opened. Matt Hill stood in the doorway with his phone in his hand. I pressed against Jacob Woolley, and he saw the embarrassment and indecency clearly. Before I could get down, Jacob Woolley suddenly kissed me. As soon as my lips touched, Matt Hill jerked over and pulled me out of Jacob Woolley's arms. Matt Hill looked at my red, swollen lips and his face became more and more ugly. Matt Hill was angry, but he didn't know who to vent to. "Jacob Woolley, why are you lying to me?" Matt Hill pondered for a long time, only finding this one that would make him find fault. Jacob Woolley looked unconcerned. He pursed his lips, as if to reminisce about the kiss he had just had. "I told you what I was going to do when I left, but I just didn't think I needed to repeat it." "Trouble, and..." Jacob Woolley looked at Matt Hill's clenched fists and smiled. "You don't want to see her. I keep her here with me. Isn't it what you want? In the future, I will simply let her live with me, and there will be no shortage of dishes and chopsticks in my house." 3 or 2 sentences left Matt Hill speechless. I immediately raised my hand in agreement. "I want pink, printed dishes and chopsticks, and white plush slippers." Matt Hill yelled at me, "Shut up." He pulled several tissues in quick succession and rubbed them against my face. "It's dirty. It stinks, like it's been licked by a dog." Matt Hill grabbed me by the ear and pulled me out. still swearing. Your dad is worried that you are worried to death, and he will probably get on a plane and return to China to find you in a while. I quietly rolled my eyes. I just disappeared from Matt Hill's house, and my dad only made a symbolic phone call to me the whole time. Rang for a few seconds and hung up. After my parents divorced, I was awarded to my dad. My mom forgot about me after she remarried. So did my dad. I thought I was a drag bottle, but I had to take on the responsibilities of my father. Whether I'm dead or alive, he doesn't care. It is more in his heart to die outside, so as not to fight for the family property with the precious son he gave birth to with another woman in the future, throwing me at Hill's house. It was also a long-term relationship with Matt Hill, and getting married after graduation, so as to get rid of my tired thoughts as soon as possible. I'm like a worthless upside down. My parents didn't care. How could Mr. Hill respect me for a little cub who had to eat and drink at his house? I didn't puncture Matt Hill. Those were the words of the supplement. Matt Hill stuffed me into the car, and pulled out several more pieces of paper and stuffed them into my mouth. I'm sick to death. Wipe it well. He circled around the car looking for water, trying to rinse my mouth, but he couldn't find it, and finally sat in the driver's seat with a puff of anger, his face smelling like sheet. When he couldn't find anything, he started to make fun of me again, scolding me in the same way, saying that I was cheap, and saying that I was shameless and worthless. I pretended to be deaf and dumb, and I didn't see being scolded and wronged, and I always talked to him as a deaf ear. Matt Hill said a little harshly, "It's really unlucky. I don't know if you have any dirty diseases now. If it weren't for the hospital getting off work, I really want to send you for a checkup." I hummed casually, "Not only do I have a dirty disease, but I also have a baby in my belly. So you take me for a checkup. Just by the way, buy me a pregnancy test." The car that was driving in the middle of the road suddenly braked suddenly. I leaned forward, my seat belt choking me out. "Matt Hill is sick, right?" I turned my head to complain, but I met Matt Hill's red eyes, and I swallowed all the curses back. Matt Hill's eyes were terrifying. His hands gripping the steering wheel were bruised, and his arms were shaking. "Iris Harriman, say it again." I saw that things were not going well, so I immediately turned around and was about to run. As soon as there was a sign of opening the door, Matt Hill reached out and pressed me against the seat. "What were you two doing when I first called Jacob Woolley?" I struggled to speak. "We two didn't do anything. You let go of me." Matt Hill doesn't believe me anymore. His eyes were frighteningly red, and there seemed to be tears in his eyes. "Why are you so shameless?" I've listened to all these insults he has spoken to me. I really want to say, "Didn't you tell me to seduce Jacob Woolley, or else you're going to clean me up? Didn't you ask for it?" I was so pinched that I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't speak. Matt Hill reached under my skirt. "I can't believe the words of a slut like you. I'll find out what happened." The car kept shaking. It's rush hour, and the streets are full of people. No matter how thick-skinned I am, I can't bear it now. "Matt Hill, go home and show you. Get it back home. Don't be here," I cried in my voice. Matt Hill's face softened a little, and he came back to his senses a little, realizing where this was. He continued to drive as if nothing had happened. I clung to the corners of my skirt, hating that it couldn't grow longer. There was silence in the car for a while, and Matt Hill asked slowly, "Do you like Jacob Woolley?" I didn't bother to explain anything, so I nodded, and I recognized it. Matt Hill smiled contemptuously. "This is the first time you've officially met, right?" Not long after I wrote a love letter, I turned around and fell in love with someone else. Iris Harriman, your liking is not worth as much as a roadside cabbage. It was late when I got home. Matt Hill pinned me into the room and rummaged through it. It's a strange scene. He wiped his wet fingertips, and his face began to look a little unnatural. "Why are you lying to me?" I straightened my nightdress, not wanting to look at him. "Because I like him." Matt Hill snorted impatiently, as if he hated the answer terribly. "I was packing my clothes on the side. He's promised to take me in, and I'll move in tomorrow." Matt Hill kicked the couch next to my bed. "Iris Harriman, are you too cheap?" Matt Hill commanded me in a fierce tone. "You are not allowed to go." I didn't ask him why he wouldn't let me go. I pointed to the door in front of me. "Your home is not a prison. I am so good. Can you still stop me?" Matt Hill went out without saying a word, but after a moment, he returned. He had an extra bunch of keys in his hand. Lock the door. I see you're still. When Matt Hill was about to lock the door, he realized that the lock was broken. The lock is not tightly closed, and the lock cannot be locked. Obviously, it was vandalism. Matt Hill was so angry that he tried several times, but the door wouldn't close. Living in my house, and breaking my things, only to pat your ass and turn your head to leave. Matt Hill was like he had seen something nasty. I'm almost laughing at it. I went out to class and was fine, but when I came home from class, I saw that it was broken, and I didn't break it. I'm looking for a locksmith, but your doorman always won't let me in, and I won't fix it, so it's always like this. I packed up a few pieces of clothing and set them aside, staring at Matt Hill wide-eyed. Matt Hill snorted coldly and glared at me viciously. If you dare to sneak out of this door, I'll break your legs. I will do what I say. He slammed the door and turned to leave. After turning off the lights, in the middle of the night, I felt like someone was around. I snapped my eyes open and met Mr. Hill's eyes. He smelled of alcohol very strongly, as if he was drunk, but those eyes were clear and shining. I screamed in fright. Mr. Hill covered my mouth and deliberately pretended to be drunk. Wife, didn't you say you would go back to your parents' house? Why don't you come home in the middle of the night, and don't say a word to me? I was held down by Mr. Hill, and I struggled violently to shake off the person in front of me who was pretending to be drunk. Mr. Hill screamed one wife after another, and his hand reached down the hem of my skirt. The chandelier in the room snapped on, and it was as bright as day. Matt Hill's incredible voice rang out, "Dad." Mr. Hill's face turned white in an instant. Mrs. Hill is gone, and Matt Hill has made it clear to him that he is hanging out with his classmates. He calculated that it was just me and him in the house. He wanted to come to my room, and when he saw that I was still there, he was overjoyed. But unbeknownst to him, Matt Hill is also back. Matt Hill was worried that I would be carrying my things to Jacob Woolley in the middle of the night, so instead of going upstairs to his bedroom, he lay down in the piano room next door. As soon as there was the slightest movement in my room, he could hear it immediately. Matt Hill never expected to come over and see such a ridiculous scene. Mr. Hill stubbornly continued to pretend to be drunk. Matt Hill, it's too unruly to enter my room with your mother without knocking. Matt Hill's face was extremely ugly. Pretending to be drunk to the point of delirium, in front of people who also drink alcohol is like a funny clown. If you drink too much, you will be sleepy and tired, but you will not use the strength of alcohol to insult others. Matt Hill came over, covered me with the quilt, and then said to Mr. Hill with a calm face, "Dad, this is Iris Harriman." Mr. Hill suddenly came to his senses, quickly apologized to me hypocritically, and then walked out crookedly. It's so confusing. I went to the wrong room. After Mr. Hill left, Matt Hill began to sit on the edge of my bed without saying a word, staring at my door lock. The room was quiet for a long time, and Matt Hill asked a clueless question. "How long?" I lay down, closed my eyes, and rolled over. "I'm about to give birth, Matt Hill." Matt Hill turned off the lights, but the man didn't leave. He lifted the quilt and lay down next to me. I ignored him, dazed, and when I was about to fall asleep, I felt a hand fall on my shoulder, like a child, patting me again and again. "Sleep, I'll watch over you." When I woke up the next day, the place around me was empty. The room was also empty. I thought I had been thrown into the warehouse with a bed. As soon as I got out of bed, I saw Matt Hill come back to get my pajamas. "From now on, you will sleep with me." I hurriedly got out of bed and grabbed him. "What do you want me to sleep with you? Did this guy get too excited last night and be stupid?" Matt Hill didn't say a word, just stared at me. We looked at each other for a long time, and finally Matt Hill looked away and said coldly, "I don't want to be a single parent. This reason is simply laughable. You can get your doorman to do it. Just let the locksmith in." Matt Hill shook off the hand I was holding him, and turned around to carry his clothes upstairs. "I didn't pay for someone. I said I couldn't move him. You either sleep in a room with me, or you can be here by yourself." I said that, but it didn't leave me a choice at all. "Matt Hill, the Fox friends are here again in the morning." This time I went straight to my room, but as soon as I opened the door, the room was so empty that I could hear the echo. When I had to go upstairs to Matt Hill's room, I saw a childish cartoon water cup next to Matt Hill's cup on the cabinet at the door. An entire third floor is Matt Hill's own room. Someone tried to look into the bedroom, but the door was closed. I nestled in the corner and played games, using those people as air. A Curly tentatively asked, Matt Hill, Iris Harriman doesn't live downstairs. Matt Hill snorted. And where does she live now? Matt Hill looked up at Jacob Woolley and said, word for word, she's living with me now. Curly gasped in shock, and looked at me like a hell of a daylight. Is it true that the toad has eaten swan meat? Everyone else was giggling and joking. Isn't it? A rustic love letter that took Matt Hill. How is that possible? It's just living together, not dating. The others smiled evilly and nodded again and again. That's right, yesterday's debauchery, kissing Jacob Woolley during the day and crawling into Matt Hill's bed at night, was so busy. As soon as these words came out, they made a few people over there laugh. Only Matt Hill and Jacob Woolley didn't laugh. Matt Hill heard those derogatory words, and he didn't refute them. His lips pursed, his head bowed, not knowing what he was thinking. Curly winked at Jacob Woolley. Brother, I heard that Iris Harriman didn't come back last night. Did she give it to you? Jacob Woolley laughed and splashed all the hot water in his hand on the man's face. The curly hair was burned and wailed, and his face was red. Jacob Woolley stared at him with a non-smiling smile. Do you have a brain and genitals upside down? Curly was so embarrassed that he couldn't get off the stage, but he didn't dare to do anything with Jacob Woolley, so he had to wipe his face with a tissue and keep silent. I quietly looked at Jacob Woolley. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Jacob Woolley was defending me. I hadn't met much of Jacob Woolley before, but I had heard a few things about him. He was a man with a great sense of justice. As long as you see something bad, you will never ignore it. If you can help, you will try to help. The circle of friends is full of forwarded messages of seriously ill fundraising. I don't know why I got mixed up with someone like Matt Hill, but he's definitely a good guy. He wasn't angry with what I did yesterday, and he didn't really do anything to me. That little punishment is not light or heavy. I stole a sneak peek into Jacob Woolley's gaze, and was caught by Matt Hill. Matt Hill glared at me. What are you looking at? I hurriedly withdrew my gaze and lowered my head to fiddle with the game console in my hand. Matt Hill turned his head to see Jacob Woolley staring at me as well. Matt Hill has a green head and a black face. Matt Hill came over and picked me up, and stuffed me and the console into the bedroom. Don't be embarrassed outside. I sat on the edge of the bed, and looked sadly at the weird big bed in front of me, half black and half pink. I don't sleep with Matt Hill until my brain is in water. After Matt Hill and his fox friends broke up, I was gone. I tied a rope with a sheet, went down the balcony to the second floor, turned around and ran. I was at the door, waiting for Jacob Woolley. Will you take me in for another night? Jacob Woolley was generous, and sure enough, he took me to his house. Matt Hill is arrogant. I saw his father like that last night, and today he tried to protect me in a different way, but I didn't appreciate it, and ran away with someone again. Matt Hill either doesn't care about me, or has a big fight with me. If I am driven out, I will be able to stay away from those neuropaths. Jacob Woolley prepares rice in the kitchen. He was busy, talking to me at the same time. Don't you want to stay at Matt Hill's house? Jacob Woolley saw the strange scene at the table yesterday. Not fools can tell that something is wrong, and I have nothing to hide. I snorted. I want to move out, Jacob Woolley said calmly. Then come to me. There is a vacant room, so I can rent it to you cheaper. I laughed and didn't reply. I just thought Jacob Woolley was joking, saying that yesterday was just deliberately angry with Matt Hill. How could he take a girl to share a room? I wouldn't share a room with a guy either, Jacob Woolley said. I have an unopened carton of milk in my bedroom. Bring it for me and I'll use it for soup. I obediently got up and went to his bedroom. I found milk on the cupboard, and when I accidentally looked up, I saw pictures plastered all over the wall. There's me in the cafeteria. There's me in the library. There's Jacob Woolley in his arms last night. I even saw a picture of me when I was a child. The door behind him clicked and locked. I turned around and looked at Jacob Woolley behind me. Jacob Woolley stared at me silently. Iris Harriman. No matter how good a person is, there will be an unknown side. I couldn't help but take a step back, and take a closer look at Jacob Woolley. Have we seen each other before? Jacob Woolley didn't answer me. He pulled out the phone from my pocket, and shoved it into my hand. Iris Harriman should know how to do it, right? Jacob Woolley holds my phone in one hand and a little dress and camera in the other. I chose to take over my own phone. Jacob Woolley lowered her skirt and looked much softer. In front of him, I called Mr. Hill. It was quickly connected, and you could still hear the babysitter on the phone asking Matt Hill what he was looking for upstairs and downstairs. Mr. Hill's voice was as gentle as ever. Iris Harriman, what's wrong? Mr. Hill, I won't bother you in the future. I'm going to move out. After I finished speaking, Mr. Hill was about to reply, but the phone was snatched away by Matt Hill. You don't have a penny on you. You go out and live a fart. Matt Hill gritted his teeth in anger. He sent those friends away with his front foot, and when he came back with his back foot, he saw that I was gone. He searched upstairs and downstairs, rummaged through the bedroom, and didn't see me. Matt Hill sneered. You're looking for Jacob Woolley again, aren't you? I just handed me a love letter yesterday, and I fell in love with Jacob Woolley. Iris Harriman, why is your liking so worthless? Jacob Woolley snatched the phone when he heard it being Matt Hill, then hung up. Don't be afraid of me. I'm not a good person, but I won't do those things to you like the Hill family. I was a little scared at first. He has a bedroom in his house that is pink, and everything is what girls like. It looks like it's been prepared for a long time, and it's been empty for a long time. I stayed in that room. My door is locked, and I don't get in the middle of the night. Jacob Woolley really does what he says. Aside from the pictures in his room, there was nothing excessive. It was Matt Hill, who had been waiting for me at the school gate all day. Jacob Woolley is almost inseparable from me. I was next to Jacob Woolley, and Matt Hill wasn't good at taking people directly. All I know is that Jacob Woolley and Matt Hill have fallen out since that day. Matt Hill gritted his teeth in hatred. You think I can't do anything about you? I only take him when the dog barks. It wasn't until Jacob Woolley was called away by the professor that I was standing outside the office and waiting, only to suddenly get a blow to the back of the head, and then my eyes went black. When I opened my eyes again, it was already at Matt Hill's house. Matt Hill was looking at me condescendingly, cigarette in his mouth. There was gloom in his eyes. Iris Harriman, your liking is so cheap anyway, so it shouldn't be too much for me to have one, right? I couldn't help but laugh out loud sarcastically. What's more, Matt Hill, do you like me? When asked about this, Matt Hill was silent. I smashed the pillow in Matt Hill's face. I have the opportunity to be a good person. Why do I have to be a bitch in your house? After being brought back by Matt Hill, I didn't leave Matt Hill's room for 3 days. My meals were brought upstairs by Matt Hill. There is a nanny in the house, who was bought by my dad. The nanny immediately told my dad about it. I left Matt Hill's house and disappeared for days, and my dad didn't have a phone call. As soon as this incident came out, my dad immediately called. My dad was excited in his tone. Where are you and Matt Hill? Matt Hill taking a bath in the bathroom. I listened to the sound of water in the bathroom, was silent for a moment, and finally grinned. I'm pregnant. When I lied, my tone was calm. But the kid isn't Matt Hill's, it's his dad's. My dad was immediately furious. Why don't you have any face? I looked innocent. I told you, something is wrong at home. I want to go out to live. You force me to move an inch. My dad has a lot of words. If you don't commit seduce, how can this happen? My dad is still giving me bad ideas to stop beating the kid. He's going to convince Mr. Hill to force Matt Hill to marry me, and the kid is Hill's family anyway. My dad immediately prepared a ticket back to China. When he rushed to Hill's house, he saw my mother blocking the door of Matt Hill's house. My mom shook his hand and gave him 2 mouths. My dad looked at his ex-wife in disbelief, who he hadn't seen in years. My mom smiled coldly. What? You think I'll not know about your mistreatment of my daughter? My dad and my mom divorced when I was very young. My dad had to fight for custody of me. I don't understand why he wants to keep me when he doesn't love me. He didn't even know how to make me powder. I wanted to go to my mother, but he wouldn't. So, I had to go secretly. The guy my mom married had a child of the same age as me, with my ex-wife. I've met him a few times. I please him, please that uncle, please my mother. I want them to accept me, and take me to them. That brother accepted me, and my mom liked me too. But that uncle didn't like me. The uncle said to me earnestly, your mom already has me and her baby, and the 3 of us are one family. If you do this, it will make our family uneasy. I don't seem to understand. That uncle told my dad about the fact that I always sneaked away. My dad had a big fight with them, and scolded me again. I was crying and hiccups. But I'm so hungry. I don't have anything to eat at home, and my mother told me to go to her when I'm hungry. Dad goes to work during the day, and goes out at night to fool around with women. When he leaves, he also cuts off the electricity to his home. At home, I can only use cold and hot water to make milk powder, gnaw vegetables, and feel so uncomfortable that I vomit sour water. I was only 6 years old. My dad can't say why he doesn't care about me, but he doesn't say he's wrong. He starved me for 2 whole days, and ended up deliberately throwing me a cake that was already sour. I wanted to vomit while eating. My dad asked me, "Are you going to go again?" I cried and shook my head. "Don't dare to go again." My uncle also moved with my mom. My dad wouldn't let my mom come to see me, and transferred me to another school. When I was a child, I didn't know why my dad was so angry. I later found out that he was just using me to fight my mom. The farther we went, the more we lost contact with my mom. When I was in junior high school, my dad remarried. The woman and my dad both thought I was a tired man. So in high school, the woman was trying to get pregnant, and I was thrown into the dormitory. When I came home from vacation, I learned that the house had been sold and that my dad and others had settled abroad. I only go to them during the winter and summer vacations to find a place to stay, but for only a few months. They couldn't tolerate me. When college started, my dad wouldn't let me live in a dormitory, but instead threw me to his friend's house. In this way, I don't have to go back during the winter and summer vacations. When I said that Mr. Hill was wrong, my dad didn't say a word about defending me. I know that my mother gives me 50,000 yuan a month for living expenses, but I can't get any of it. I can't move an inch without relatives. Until I remembered the pictures of me as a kid in Jacob Woolley's room. The background looked so familiar. That's where mom and that uncle were in the beginning. I sent a recording of my dad's call, and a camera in his room to take every night to show evidence of Mr. Hill's misdeeds. Help me, brother. I, perhaps, am not unaccompanied? Mr. Hill and my dad were beaten up by my mom. I clung to my mom, and suddenly understood what it was like to find something to rely on. Matt Hill stood aside, not calling me any more disparaging names, nor doing anything to me, because I'm not alone now. The metal decoration on the bag made the two of them dazzle. My mom held me tightly in her arms, and scolded the two of them. When I packed my things, and took them out of Matt Hill's room, Matt Hill grabbed my suitcase. My mom doesn't have a good look at this little beast either. What? Are you looking for a fight? Matt Hill just slapped my mom twice, and it hurt so badly now. But there was no anger on his face. He stared straight at me. You're not going to transfer schools, are you? Jacob Woolley pushed him away, and brought my suitcase. You don't have to worry about it. I didn't reply. I didn't look at him, and my mom and I left without looking back. While in the car, my mom was holding my hand tightly. I snuggled into her arms. That's nice. I'm no longer helpless. The end.